Well, welcome. It's good to be with you all. And we just look forward to spending this time together, creating a space of acceptance, love, and peace together as we explore the topic today of neurodivergence. And we're very grateful to you, Ashana, for being our guest speaker. So our youngest daughter, Ashana, is here to share her story and some of the things she's seen along the way. And for those of you that are familiar with Angus's and our work around rewilding really is about connecting with your essence, connecting with that space of peace and love, the truth of who you are, through embracing all of the human experience, not by bypassing it, but by really opening to the fullness of the present moment and opening to the fullness of who you are. And in that, there's a real celebration of diversity of the human experience. And today's topic, Sean is going to be talking about moving through disorder, and we're going to be looking at neurodivergence. And from one, and also we have different perspectives. This panel isn't always going to agree on everything. And so we see the health in the diversity of opinions. We had dinner last night and shared lots. So that was great to talk things through and to have room for where we're each at on this journey of humanness. And so we welcome everyone's different perspectives that you're going to have on this. And we recognize that we are all unique. So on one level, we're all neurodivergent because there's no one person who's exactly the same as another person. But within that, there's also the cultural conditioning that we grow up with that can create ideals and constructs about what it is to be normal or neurotypical. And some of us have a much easier time fitting into those social constructs. And some of us have a much harder time fitting in or can't even fit into those at all. And there can be a lot of suffering that is experienced around that often is can be minimized, can be overlooked because it's not considered to be part of the cultural norm. And so this conversation, we're really hoping to be more inclusive and create more understanding. We know it's not going to be a definitive conversation. It's the start of our conversation here. And but we felt it was something that we hope is going to be helpful to others and really broadening our own understanding as well. And so I'm here to learn and grow along with all of you.
Was the implication that I was going to be the member of this panel that was going to be in disagreement?
No, I didn't say that.
I don't know. I thought that the finger might be pointing in my direction in that respect. But
No defensiveness on you.
Start as how I mean to go on, I guess. I'm almost so proud and feel so excited to be able to do this with you. I think it's wonderful, and I was just thinking how, perhaps being a parent, being your parent, and then maybe times in the past is like, I am the elder, I know more, and now that is so much not the case. And I feel that that you're so eloquent and really every time you share now, I realize how much I don't know. So I feel very humbled to be able to do this with you, and I'm excited to see where this goes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so we'll turn it over to you, Ashana, but I just wanted to let people know that we're going to have time for sharing with the three of us sharing, and then we want to give you an opportunity to share. So we're going to have some breakout sessions, and then we're going to come back into the main group, and there'll be an opportunity to share whatever you'd like to share or to ask any questions if you'd like to ask any questions at that point in time. And if people have sort of questions along the way, can they raise their hand? Yeah. So if you have any questions that come up while you're sharing that you'd like to ask before the breakout, we recommend that you kind of see if it's something that would benefit from you sharing first and then asking. But if there's something that you don't understand or have a question, just raise your hand and then we'll know that you want to share something. Or you could just unmute yourself and share. Anything else? Okay. All right, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, hi, I am Ashana, the daughter of these two. I think I wanted to start with why I called this moving through disorder, because I think for me, I want to talk about my journey between looking at myself as a disordered individual and to something that's more of my authentic creative expression that feels aligned and truthful to me rather than feeling like there's something inherently wrong with me, because I think that's how it started out for the most part for me. Because when I was 19, I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And along that, I was also diagnosed with OCD. And this was a very pivotal time for me because before then, I always just felt outcasted and weird and not normal. And so having this diagnosis felt like an explanation after that. And so with growing up before the diagnosis, there it wasn't like an absence of not having autism or OCD. It was just feeling like I was going crazy for the longest time. And then a lot of it was feeling like everyone understood something that I didn't understand. And there was this pedestal that I needed to reach that I wasn't reaching. And I would try so hard to reach it and do everything in my power to make myself look like a normal person that fit in with everyone else. And no matter what I did, there was always something that I felt like people were able to clock about me, that I was different or I was unusual. Because for how autism shows up for me, I'm diagnosed with level 1 autism. With the autism spectrum, there's lower masking and higher masking, and I'm a higher masking individual. So I have more capacity and threshold to kind of try to fit in. And so I don't appear as someone who people would usually calls typically autistic. And so for me, it really shows up in my social settings and my how I relate to the external environment in terms of getting overwhelmed and overstimulated. I tend to shut down a lot, and I think the more I accept myself, the less that happens. I've noticed that more. I used to have a lot of panic attacks when I was younger, and they were related to autism. We didn't know that at the time. And it would be, people consider them autistic meltdowns as well. It's another word for it. And it's kind of just everything, it feels so overwhelming and so overstimulating that you shut down and you're not able to just regulate yourself and nothing's really helping. And so it kind of mimics a panic attack, but it's not actually a panic attack. Um, and so those are kind of the ways it shows up for me.
Can
Yeah.
I ask a question? Could you
Mhm.
just explain a little bit about masking? Because I think that there are
Yes.
some people that don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I feel that's something that's
Yes.
new for me,
Yes.
relatively new.
So masking it's something neurodivergent people or specifically autistic people do to, it's kind of like a survival mode to fit in with everyone else. So you're not um singled out, and a lot of times like autistic people are abused or they're like there's a lot of trauma within being othered, and so they use masking as a way to not be othered and to fit in. And so it looks like, I mean, in the smallest sense, it looks like just making eye contact with people. A lot of autistic people can't make eye contact, and for me that's something that's also very difficult. But if I'm in a situation where I want people to not get mad at me for not looking at them in the eyes, I look at them in the eyes. And so like that's like a very small example of it, but that would be an example of masking, is you're doing something that's not, it's not comfortable for you, but you're doing it just so you don't get singled out by other people, or like you want to fit into normality basically.
It's sort of I guess the way that I hear that is sort of suggesting that you're kind of having to sort of put on a mask, you're acting something out that wouldn't feel
Yes, it's a
necessarily your part of your
performance.
performance.
Yes,
Yeah.
performance. Yeah. And so, and it's like a survival performance for a
Yeah.
lot of people. I think for me, I do have a lot of privilege with being white, and so I think my performance isn't as dire of survival, but there were things with my gender that I felt like I needed to do that as some form of survival. So I didn't feel like outcasted.
And it can be unconscious as well as conscious. Some
Yes,
people aren't even
yes.
aware that they're doing it. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, my like where I am and where my mask ends is really, I don't even know. Like I've been doing it for so long. I've been doing it ever since I was a kid, that there isn't a distinction between the two. And so learning how to unmask is it's a process that I think I'll be doing for the rest of my life. And I think also with masking, like it's not always a bad thing. I think it's like either you can elevate your personality sometimes, and that's kind of what I've tried to start doing instead of completely changing who I am and doing things that are harming me. It's kind of just finding ways to still be myself, but kind of code switching that people, because I think it's what everyone does. Everyone has some form of mask. It's just either harmful or not.
And I think that's important to recognize that even people without, who I don't identify as autistic or neurodivergent necessarily, we're all masked to some extent,
Yeah.
but there can be a lack of understanding about the level of masking that goes on.
Yeah, because I think for masking for autistic people, it's really harmful and it causes a lot of pain. And so oftentimes when you're in a social situation and you're masking and you're doing that for a few hours after that situation, that's when like a meltdown will occur or you're completely overstimulated and you've used your whole capacity that you have no capacity for anything anymore. And so you lash out or you act in ways that are harmful to yourself or others, basically. And so it lowers your threshold. You're using so much energy. And for me, it really shows up as burnout, where I just feel like I can't do anything anymore. And so oftentimes, like after social situations, I don't. And I look at it more of like, this is like self-soothing now. It's like I need that time for myself to just like de-sensory overload. Yeah. And so after getting diagnosed with autism and OCD, it was kind of like it was this own journey of trying to figure out what it looked like for me, because I had this own stigma around what both of those diagnoses looked like. I know for OCD, I thought it was just like being really neat and organized and flicking light switches, and I had no idea what it was. And so I didn't go there for an OCD diagnosis either. So it was really like, it kind of blew my mind figuring out what it was.
On and off.
Yeah, there's compulsions
Right.
basically. And I'm specifically don't have compulsions. So I just didn't know that there's so much more to it with the intrusive thoughts and just like shame and the anxiety about it. And so having that diagnosis kind of like, it took a weight off my shoulders in a sense of knowing that I wasn't this horrible, terrible person. There was now an explanation for it. But with both of these diagnoses came like, I feel like the unmasking and finding my authentic expression was also embedded with like now trying not to pathologize myself with having these identities. Like, how do I feel authentically myself without feeling disordered now that I have technically disorder diagnoses? And so I think they both weaved in and out, and there were sometimes where one was stronger than the other. And I think it's still something that I'm working through. But I think I'm finding closer now what authentic expression looks like. And so even though it was an explanation, there was this sense that like something was still wrong with me, because that's how I kind of viewed autism, is like it's culturally deemed as just like you're more inept or you're not able to like be what everyone else is. And so there was still this sense that I was still othered and like there's still something wrong with me and I'll never be able to be how other people are, because I had this goal of wanting to achieve being normal, basically. And that's what I'm undoing now, is it's not about being normal, it's just about being me. But it was so hard when growing up, you internalize that it's not okay to be yourself. And that's how I felt, was like, it wasn't okay to be me because the way that I was acting was not like socially acceptable. And so I had to be a completely different person. And so to unmask was to completely undo all of that conditioning. And that was like probably one of the hardest things I had to do, is like having to like switch that perspective. And I'm still doing it. It's still really difficult. And like there's still things that I feel like I can't do. And I think specifically with like stimming, a lot of autistic people stim too. We were talking about this last night, to get over sensory overload or overstimulation. There's like a way to self-soothe. And so a lot of it will be hand flapping or rocking or like rubbing your hands, touching your hair. And so there's like, and that's a way that is really helpful for autistic people to self-regulate. And I still don't really allow myself to do that, because I don't want to like have people be looking at me and like doing that in public. Um But with finding authentic expression, I think autism is something that I hold really close to myself and my identity, and I don't see it as something I've pathologized in myself anymore. It feels like me, and I feel proud to say that it's me now. And so with that label, I feel like I sought it out for so long to prove that it was something that was wrong with me. Or now it feels like it's a part of a community that I fit into, and there's people out there who also experience the same things that I experience, and that it's we're all just figuring it out together. And I want to be able to contribute to the education and the destigmatizing autism, because I think there's a lot of miseducation on it, specifically with it primarily being researched on white cis men. There's not a lot of research on women or POC, and so it's something that I want to be able to advocate for and show that there's different levels of how it shows up in different people. And with that authentic expression, a big part of it is also tied to me figuring out my sexuality. And I know when I was around 16 and I started questioning my sexuality and like kind of deferring out of gender roles, is like when I was able to start unmasking, is it was getting out of heteronormativity and neuronormativity, and also like separating myself from gender roles and not looking at myself as just needing to be this perfect straight woman, which is what I was looking at for so long. And so I think there's a really big intersection with figuring out how to express myself in my best neurodiverse way, and also as not a straight person anymore. And I think like being able to realize that it's okay to have different ways you want to express yourself, and not like there is no idea of what normality looks like. That's not real at all. There's no way we can define what normalcy looks like. And I think we've tried to for so long, and like realizing that it's just not real has helped me be able to dissect what I've created in my mind for myself, and then be able to finally figure out what I want me to look like, and who I like, what makes me feel the best, and the ways that I act. And so there's still times where like that programming conditioning gets to me, and I still struggle with it. But I think I have those moments of feeling so authentically me and so grounded in myself that now I always have my safety net to fall back to. I feel like I've created a safe place within myself, that all the programming conditioning and all the fear that I had about expressing myself, it will still happen, but I have now like a safe space to go back to. Yeah.
That's pretty profound. And that safe space that you now have a reference point for, could you say a little bit more about how you found that or uncovered it? Or
Yeah, I think I feel like it was a very long progression of something that I've always wanted, but it didn't feel like was possible in myself, because I think like as a teenager, I was really scared of myself. And I didn't feel safe within myself, because I really hated myself and I did not like who I was, and everything, all the judgments on the outside, and I internalized on the inside. And I was telling all these things to myself, and that I like every part of me I just felt was wrong and I needed to change, and I just felt like I couldn't live with myself. And then going into adulthood and learning how to unmask, I recognized that and saw how much fear I had for myself, and in wanting to love myself, how do I learn to trust myself again, basically, because I felt like I couldn't trust myself anymore because I wanted to harm myself before. And so in learning to trust myself, I realized that it started with doing small things for myself that made me feel good, and then really honoring the things that I need. I think specifically for autism, social situations, they're really hard for me. And so I will be less social. And I feel really judged for being less social a lot of the time by other people, because I think there's this view that everyone needs to be social and extroverted, and introversion is weird and wrong. And so I felt like really pushed to be social. And when I started unmasking and honoring myself, I honored that, like, there are times when I don't want to be around anyone and I just want to be by myself, and it's okay. And then the more I learned to love and honor myself, the more fun I had just being alone and how regulating it was to be alone. And then when I felt ready to be around other people, the way I was expressing myself was really true to me and felt really happy and genuine and kind, and I wasn't just this like stressed, moody child anymore. And so with starting to do little things that are honoring myself and like understanding that it's okay to feel good and it's okay to do things that make you feel good and safe, I was rebuilding that trust in myself and kind of showing myself that I do have the capacity to love and accept myself. And so it was just kind of a push to kind of like do that, because it felt wrong to do that for a while and it felt like I couldn't love and accept myself. And so when it just started shifting, I was just slowly building trust. And then there was one day where I sat down and I realized that I do trust myself and that I do feel safe in myself, because when things felt hard and scary on the outside, I would go into my room alone and I'd be with myself and I'd self-soothe. And I realized that I was able to do that now. And that now, if anything on the outside externally was too much or too overwhelming, I now had a place to go back to that would help. And so that was my safety net. And so now I have this foundation that I built that I keep expanding and building. And I think as I get older, because that was a few years ago, so now it's like just gotten so much more filled with love and like just like I don't know, when I visualize it, it feels like this glowing like space in my chest that I can just fall back into. And the more I honor and accept and love myself, like I'm building onto that foundation and like creating a bigger net for me to fall into.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. You're very visual, like the dad.
Yes.
It's so interesting. My goodness. So with the social anxiety, for you now, I would imagine that there's a lot of self-confidence that evolves out of you just being able to be present with other people and know all that's expected of me is just to be myself. I'm actually really comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
So I imagine now, you know, witnessing you today, you seem really, you move in social circles very fluidly and very confidently from my observation. So I imagine that has been very healing for you. It's like, yeah, I can just be myself, which seems to be the nature of the work that we all do, is like helping people get in touch with their authentic nature. Certainly that was what the Pranskys drilled into my head in terms of my fears of showing up, doing this work and feeling like I have to model myself on other people, when all that was required is that I just have to be myself. And I keep reminding myself of that very feature when I may, you know, sit down and have a coaching session. It's like, all I need to do is just show up, be myself, and trust my instincts. And that's really, you know, and it's so amazing to me to hear you talk today at your age, because it's been a lifetime for me unmasking, you know, I mean, it's only very relatively recently, which I've actually thought about unmasking, although I haven't even used that language. I have had a very strong mask for many years. And just to share one brief story, which I think is kind of funny, I had a tremendous judgment towards myself for being shy as a younger man. And I would find myself in social situations where I would just see everybody else seemingly being very confident, very comfortable. And I would really struggle to sort of to show up and to be present in the way that I saw everyone else being present. And then I read this book, I think, I was in my late 20s, and I remember my best friend at the time handed me this book. He says, "You need this, like most people need oxygen. You need to read this book." And it was called Psycho-Cybernetics. And I won't go into, you know, ins and outs of this book, but one of the prompts was that to talk loud, it's a disinhibitor. It will help you with your shyness. It will help you in social situations. So I basically went around shouting at everyone. But that was nevertheless a mask, which was helpful, but to one degree, but it also made everything feel like a performance. So every social situation I went into felt like a performance. And I've been carrying that for probably, you know, years, decades, Rahini's smiling because
Because I met your dad.
No.
And he read this book and he says, you need to read this book. I'm like, what is this shit? This is ridiculous. I'm going to cry if I want to cry.
right. But I can see how that was just another way where, you know, I mean, I guess it's in some ways it's a useful tool, but it ultimately wasn't helpful for me because it was showing me you don't have to be authentic. You can hide your authentic self behind this mask of showing up and being
Screaming at
loud,
people.
which felt really hard in many ways. It felt like a performance, but I basically became someone else. Even in my career as a photographer, people would think I'm the life and soul of the party, but no, actually inside I was really struggling.
Yeah.
And that's why I would get very anxious about showing up for work. You know, you saw me or witnessed me had sleepless nights about doing jobs because I was just worried, oh, I've got to go in and spend the whole day performing.
Yeah, it's
So
exhausting.
So you've kind of really enlightened me in terms of how you have talked about your autism and talked about some of the features of what it means to be autistic. And I guess the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
It is genetic.
In many respects. But I still also have, you know, I still am someone that struggles with labels, and I kind of, you know, and I like the fact that it's called the spectrum, and there is an enormous spectrum, and but I think that within that enormous spectrum, it is about people suffering with this difficulty of being able to show up and being their authentic selves, and having that self-judgment that one might have towards oneself for being authentic.
And I think with labels, like, there are people out there who just can't do labels, and I think that's okay. And like, but I think that's where like there's a stigma that like we do need labels to identify ourselves, and that's what identity is it's labels, but it's not. For some people, labels are really helpful, and I think for me it's been helpful and also unhelpful. And for you it might not be helpful, and so it's like you don't have to label yourself in any way that you don't want to. And I feel like, I don't know, it goes into many different things, but there's a lot of fluidity to a lot of things, and we can be fluid. And like a lot of things are a spectrum. And we live in this world that feels like binary needs to exist and boxes need to exist, which don't really need to. But I think for me, I know with unmasking, like I felt like my identity was lost after I like realized I needed to like take down this performance and this mask that I was doing. I felt like that's who I was, and then finding out that wasn't me was really hard to acknowledge, and then finding out that I needed to like figure out who I was after that. Like I was 20 and I had no idea who I was, and I felt like everyone was supposed to figure that out when there was like a child or a teenager, and now I was this adult that just had no sense of identity. And so I think for a while I was really like looking to labels to kind of show me who I was. But I think after doing that and after labeling myself, then I was able to kind of break down what those labels meant for me and then not pathologize them and feel like I can just be me. Like it kind of felt like a stepping stool in a sense, like, because being diagnosed with autism wasn't now all of a sudden I am this person who's like wrong and like doing things that aren't okay. It was because I had already felt that growing up my whole life. That was my experience, was like I was just born inherently wrong. And so being diagnosed with autism was now this freedom of like, I am actually a part of this community, and I am like a person that I can be this way, basically. Like I didn't have to change who I was anymore. It felt growing up, I felt like I needed to change this part of me. And then realizing that it was autism, I was like, I don't need to change anymore. And now I get to look at what being like acting as an autistic person looks like, and having like freedom and just being me, basically. And I think also with the performance and the social anxiety and how people view you as this really confident person, I think that's the case for like a lot of people. A lot of people have social anxiety, and whether it's like, it's not just autism, a lot of people have anxiety, and like we are all doing this performance in social situations, and I just don't understand why we feel this need when everyone's like, I don't want to be in this performance or this anxiety. I want everyone to just accept me, and everyone's thinking that. It's why aren't we doing it? We're still in this performance. And it's the social conditioning that's just been rooted in us for so long. And I think we are making steps towards that. And that's for like, for me, these pockets of community with autism or neurodivergence and like queerness, it's like those people, it is that they are like acting in those ways where it's like, we don't need to be in this social normal conditioning. We get to just be us and our weird selves.
Mhm.
And that's why I feel really attracted to those spaces. So yeah.
There's the freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask one more question before we turn to the, I'm curious because as along with this journey around the psychological, you've also been on a spiritual exploration. So is there an intersection? Is there an interplay? I'm just curious what that's been like for you to be on both journeys.
Yeah.
Because they can be very different.
Yeah. I think, well, my spirituality is like what has really, really helped me. And it's something that like I didn't like, it can be in a religion in some sense, but it's not an organized religion, so it's just whatever I want it to be. But I didn't realize as a kid that I was praying pretty much when I was talking to the universe, and I was like asking for things, and it's a form of prayer. And so I think like having some sort of faith was really, really beneficial for me. And so I do tarot readings and I use my oracle decks, and like in that, I also view it as a form of my subconscious that I'm tapping into. And so my tarot readings like kind of felt like I was talking to a deeper part of within me that was based in love and compassion. And so a lot of like what I was able to like realize and help in myself came a lot from my tarot readings. And so like it's very deeply interwoven into like this process and this journey. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I was blown away when you started doing the tarot reading, but I don't know why I should have been blown away. It was just more of a validation about here is yet another tool that people can use to tap into their innate wisdom. And your innate wisdom was shining through in a really beautiful way, where you would give us tarot readings and you could see how your intuition was kicking in and being very on point with what it was pointing to for all of us. It's fascinating. And I think there are many avenues to tap in that way. But I think that probably was a turning point for you. Would you say that was when you kind of got into tarot?
Yeah.
You started to discover, oh yeah, there's a part of me inside that's intuitive, that's wise.
Yes, because I think when I first started it, it was like a channel of the universe speaking to me through cards. And so, and the universe is just based in love and compassion for me and is never going to judge me. And then over the years, as I'm doing it, I feel more connected and viewing myself as the universe as well. It's like, oh, this is coming from me. I am this place of love and compassion and non-judgment and acceptance towards myself.
So it may be the greatest training tool out there for people who want to start coaching. To familiarize themselves with their innate wisdom and their intuitive powers, because in a sense you could say, yeah, those are my training wheels, and I don't need that anymore. I can just trust my instincts. So how fantastic that you had that experience.
It is. And now with my journey of like wanting to become a life coach, I tell people about my experience with tarot readings. They're like, it's the same thing, just remove the cards.
Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, okay.
It's like Dumbo's feather, you know. You could let it go. It's all you. It's inside of you, right?
Well, that's beautiful. Is there anything else you want to share?